I found $9,200 missing from my heart surgery recovery fund 3 days after they wheeled me out of the ICU. I called my daughter and asked, "Did you use my account to pay for Marcus's boat?" She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Dad, you're retired. You don't need that money sitting there doing nothing. His family's been wanting this for years." I looked at the phone in my hand, the same hand that used to carry her on my shoulders through the county fair, and understood for the first time that the daughter I raised might have been counting the days until I got weak enough not to notice. Welcome to the channel, and thank you for sitting with me a while. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment. Some details in this story have been changed to protect the people in it, but what it leaves behind is real enough. My name is Walter Simmons. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in the same house on Redbird Lane for going on 35 years. The one with the wraparound porch my late wife, Carol, always said made the place look bigger than it actually was. Carol's been gone 6 years now. Aneurysm, sudden, no warning, no goodbye speech. Just a Tuesday morning where she didn't wake up beside me the way she had for 31 years. I still make coffee for two some mornings out of habit before I catch myself. The house got quiet after that, in a way that isn't peaceful, the kind of quiet that has weight to it, that sits in the hallway and reminds you who used to fill it. I learned to iron my own shirts. I learned to sit through a whole movie without somebody's hand finding mine in the dark. I learned a man can survive almost anything if he tells himself it's temporary, even when some part of him knows it isn't. 4 months ago, my cardiologist, a careful, plain-spoken man named Dr. Aaron Feldstein, sat across from me in his office in Columbus and told me I had a 90% blockage in 2 arteries and needed open-heart surgery within the month. Or I was, in his words, gambling with a bad hand. I remember staring at the diagram he drew on his little pad, the heart broken down into simple shapes, like something a child could color in, and thinking how strange it was that something so complicated could be explained in circles and arrows. Triple bypass, he said. 6 to 8 weeks of recovery, cardiac rehab after that, restrictions on lifting, on driving, on nearly everything I'd built my retirement around. Fishing trips, working on the truck in the garage, carrying my own groceries in from the car like a man who still counts for something. I have 2 children. My son David lives out in Seattle, works in software, calls on Sundays, sends money when I don't ask for it and don't need it, which used to embarrass me until I understood it was just how he loved people, from a careful distance, in dollar amounts. And then there's my daughter Renee, 34, who lives 20 minutes away in Dublin with her husband Marcus and my 2 grandkids, Ellie and Sam. Renee was always the one who stayed close, the one who brought casseroles when Carol died, the one who sat with me at every follow-up appointment for the first 2 years after, holding my hand in waiting rooms like she was the parent now and I was the one who needed watching. I loved her for that. I trusted her for that. And trust, I have learned, is a door you can only leave open so many years before somebody walks through it who was never invited. The surgery went well, all things considered. 6 hours on the table, a chest full of staples, a body that felt like it had been taken apart and reassembled by someone in a hurry. Renee was there when I woke up, her hand already wrapped around mine before my eyes had even focused. "You did great, Dad," she said. "I've got everything handled. Don't worry about a single thing." I remember thinking, lying there with tubes running out of me in 3 directions, that I was the luckiest man in that whole recovery wing because I had a daughter who showed up. Some of the other beds on that floor, the nurses told me quietly, didn't get visitors at all. Before the surgery, worried about exactly this kind of situation, worried about being unconscious and helpless and unable to manage my own affairs even for a few days, I had done what I thought was the responsible thing. I added Renee as a secondary signer on my checking account, the one that held my recovery fund. 6 weeks of expenses, set aside for home health aides, medical copays, the physical therapist who was going to come to the house twice a week for the first month. $31,000, money I had saved carefully over 4 years, specifically for this surgery. Money that represented every extra shift I picked up at the hardware store after I officially retired. Every year I didn't take the vacation so I could put it away instead. I gave Renee access to that account the way you hand someone a spare key, not because you expect them to rob the place, but because you might need someone to water the plants while you're gone. The first 10 days home were hard, in the ordinary way surgery is hard. Pain that lived in my chest like a second heartbeat. A walker I hated using in front of my own grandchildren. Renee came by every day, sometimes twice, bringing groceries, driving me to appointments, sitting with me while daytime television played in the background, and neither of us really watched it. I remember thinking those were good days. Difficult but good. The kind of days that make a father believe he raised somebody worth being proud of. It was on day 11, going through my bank statements online because the physical therapist's bill hadn't been paid yet and I wanted to understand why, that I found the withdrawal. $9,200, transferred out in a single transaction 12 days earlier, the day before my surgery, routed to a marine dealership 40 minutes north of Dublin. I sat there in my recliner with my laptop balanced on a pillow across my healing chest and read that line item 4 times, certain I was misunderstanding something, certain there was an explanation that didn't require me to think what I was already starting to think. I called Renee. She picked up on the second ring, cheerful, the sound of her kids somewhere behind her in the background. "Hey, Dad. Everything okay?" "I'm looking at my account," I said. "There's a withdrawal here. $9,200. Marine dealership. Did you use my card for something?" There was a pause. Not a long one, but long enough that I felt something drop in my stomach before she even answered. "Okay, don't be mad," she said, which is a sentence that has never once in the history of the world preceded good news. "Marcus has wanted a boat for years, Dad. Since before Ellie was born, and his cousin found this insane deal on a used pontoon, but it was only available for like 2 days, and I knew you had that money just sitting there, and I thought, honestly, what's the point of you having 30 grand parked in an account, earning basically nothing, when your grandkids could be out on the lake this summer, making memories with you?" I didn't say anything for a moment. I was trying to find the part of that sentence that made sense to me. The part where taking money meant for my recovery to buy her husband a boat was something a reasonable person does without asking. I couldn't find it. That money was for my surgery, Renee, for the aid, for the physical therapist, and it's still there. Mostly, she said, like this was a comfort. I only took what we needed for the down payment. And Dad, come on, you're retired. David sends you money whenever you need it. You don't need $31,000 sitting in a checking account when your own grandkids could be benefiting from it right now instead of after you're gone. I heard the words "after you're gone" come out of my daughter's mouth in reference to my own money, spoken as casually as if she were discussing the weather, and something in my chest went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the surgery. "I'm going to need that money back," I said. "It's not really about the money, is it?" she said, and her voice had shifted now, gotten harder, defensive in the particular way people get when they know they're wrong but have already decided they're not going to admit it. "You've always been like this, careful with everything, counting every penny. Mom used to say you'd count out exact change at the grocery store even when you had a $100 bill in your wallet. Marcus's family doesn't have what we have, Dad. His parents are barely scraping by on Social Security. Is it really so terrible that for once, somebody in this family did something generous instead of hoarding it all?" Cheap. She didn't use the word "not that day," but I heard it underneath everything she said, the way you can hear thunder before you see the lightning that caused it. I had built a chest full of staples and a savings account full of sacrifice, and somehow, in the space of one phone call, I had become the villain of a story about generosity, a man too small and too careful to understand what family really means. I didn't argue further that day. I was tired in the particular way that surgery tires a person, tired down in the bones, and some instinct in me, some quiet, old, patient instinct, told me that arguing wasn't going to get that money back, and it certainly wasn't going to help me heal. I said I needed to rest, and I hung up the phone, and I lay there in my recliner looking at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me, thinking about Carol, wondering what she would have made of this, wondering if she would have handled it better than I was handling it, which at that moment meant not handling it at all. Over the following weeks, things did not improve. The physical therapist's third session went unpaid until I moved money from my own emergency reserve to cover it, a reserve that was never meant to touch my recovery expenses. The home health aid I had budgeted for twice a week became once a week, then every other week, because I was quietly running the numbers and realizing I could no longer afford what I had planned. Renee, for her part, seemed to believe the matter was settled. She continued coming by, continued bringing groceries, continued acting as though nothing between us had shifted, and in some strange way that made it worse, not better, because it meant she genuinely did not understand that she had done anything wrong. It was my son David who noticed first, actually, calling on a Sunday and asking why I sounded off. I told him. I told him everything, the withdrawal, the boat, the conversation, the after you're gone. David went quiet on the other end of the line for a long time. Dad, he finally said, I need you to actually hear what I'm about to say. This isn't the first time. What do you mean? 2 years ago. Mom's life insurance payout. Remember how Renee said she'd handle setting up the trust for Ellie and Sam's college funds, and it took forever, and she kept saying the paperwork was complicated? I remembered. I had thought nothing of it at the time. Renee had always been the organized one, the one who handled things. I looked into it a few months ago because Ellie asked me about her college fund at Thanksgiving and had no idea what she was talking about. David said, Dad, there is no trust. There never was. That money went into Renee and Marcus's joint account, and it's mostly gone. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to start a war over something I couldn't prove for certain, and because some of it, I think, genuinely did go to the kids. New clothes, school stuff. But not all of it. Not close to all of it. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up, longer than I've sat with almost anything in my life outside of the week Carol died. Because what David was describing wasn't a boat. It wasn't one bad decision made in the rush of a good deal on a used pontoon. It was a pattern, a quiet, patient pattern, stretching back years. And I had been too trusting, too grateful for a daughter who showed up to ever look closely enough to see it. That night, I did something I had never done in 68 years of life. I bought a small digital recorder from the pharmacy, the kind meant for dictating notes, and I began keeping it in my jacket pocket every time Renee came to the house. I am not a man who enjoys deception. I want to be clear about that, because I know how this might sound. But I had spent my whole life giving people the benefit of the doubt, and the benefit of the doubt had cost me $31,000, and I was starting to understand a good deal more than that over the years. I decided I owed myself, for the first time in a long time, the simple protection of the truth, spoken plainly and kept somewhere it couldn't later be denied. Over the next 6 weeks, I recorded 11 conversations. I am not going to walk you through each one, because most of them were mundane, groceries and grandchildren and the ordinary texture of a daughter's visits. But 3 of them mattered. In one, Renee mentioned, almost in passing, that Marcus's parents' name was already on the boat's title alongside hers, a detail she had never shared with me, which meant the family boat I had unknowingly funded belonged, on paper, to people I had met perhaps 4 times in my life. In another, she asked me directly, testing the waters, whether I had considered adding her as power of attorney, just to make things easier going forward, since your memory's not what it used to be, Dad, and it would save everybody a headache. I have never once forgotten an appointment, a birthday, or a bill in my entire adult life, and I told her so, gently, and she dropped the subject, but I noted the date, and I noted the phrase, your memory's not what it used to be, because I recognized it for what it was. Not concern, reconnaissance. The third conversation was the one that finally settled everything for me. It was early December, cold enough that the oak tree in my backyard, the one Carol had planted the year we moved in, stood bare and dark against a white sky. Renee came by unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in the middle of a physical therapy exercise the aide had left instructions for. Resistance bands looped around my ankles, sweating through a shirt at 70% of my old strength, and hating every minute of it. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, uninvited, and got straight to it. Dad, I've been talking to a lawyer, she said. My hands went still on the resistance band. About what? About you. About your care going forward. You had major surgery. You're recovering slower than we hoped. And honestly, watching you struggle with these exercises, I'm worried. I think we need to talk seriously about whether you should still be managing your own finances. There are options, conservatorship arrangements, that would let me handle things so you don't have to stress about bills and accounts while you focus on getting better. I looked at my daughter across the same kitchen table where I had once taught her to do long division, where she had cried over a boy in 11th grade, where she had sat holding my hand through 2 years of grief after her mother died, and I understood, with a clarity that felt almost peaceful in its coldness, exactly what was happening. This was never really about a boat. The boat had simply been the first test, the first small theft, to see whether I would push back or let it go. And when I let it go, when I said I need that money back in a tired voice and then quietly absorbed the loss instead of fighting, she had learned something about me. She had learned I could be managed. That's a serious step, Renee, I said, keeping my voice even. A conservatorship. That would mean a court decides I'm not capable of running my own life. It's not about capability, Dad. It's about support. You've had a hard year. I had heart surgery. I didn't have a stroke. My mind is exactly what it's always been. I just think, she said, and here her voice caught slightly, the practiced catch of someone who has rehearsed the emotional beats of an argument in front of a mirror, that Mom would want you taken care of. And I'm the one who's here, Dad. David's in Seattle. He sends checks. I'm the one who shows up. I felt the old guilt rise in me, automatic as a reflex. The guilt she had been counting on. The guilt of a father who had, in fact, always been a little easier on David from a distance than on the daughter who did the daily, unglamorous work of showing up. But underneath the guilt, for the first time, there was something else now too. A recorder in my jacket pocket, quietly running. And a memory, 4 years old, of a decision I had made in a lawyer's office the week after Carol's funeral, a decision I had never mentioned to anyone, including my own children, because at the time, it had felt like nothing more than sensible paperwork. I hear you, I told her that afternoon, and I meant it, in the sense that I heard exactly what she was trying to do. Let me think on it. 3 days later, I drove myself to the office of Diane Whitcomb, the estate attorney who had helped me settle Carol's affairs and who had, at my request back then, set up something I had almost forgotten I possessed. Diane's office sat on the second floor of a converted brick building downtown, overlooking the river, and she greeted me the way she always had, with a firm handshake and no wasted time. I told her everything. The boat, the missing college trust David had discovered, the recorder in my pocket, the conservatorship conversation at my kitchen table 3 days earlier. Diane listened without interrupting, taking notes in small, precise handwriting, and when I finished, she set her pen down and looked at me steadily. Walter, she said, what you're describing, the pattern of unauthorized withdrawals, combined with someone actively building a case for conservatorship against a person of sound mind, that's not a family disagreement. That's financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. And depending on what those recordings capture, it may also be fraud. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. There's something else you need to understand before we go further, Diane said. 4 years ago, when we settled Carol's estate, you asked me to set up a revocable living trust for your remaining assets, your house, your retirement accounts, and a protected reserve fund. Do you remember that? I remember thinking it seemed excessive at the time. You told me it was for probate reasons. It was in part, Diane said. But it also means that a significant portion of your assets, your house, your retirement fund, are held by the trust, not by you personally. Renee cannot access trust assets through a joint checking account, no matter what signing authority you gave her. And more importantly, if she or anyone else attempts to pursue a conservatorship, they would need to prove incapacity to a court, and they would need to do it against a trust structure specifically designed to survive exactly this kind of challenge. Your checking account was vulnerable. Your life's work was not. I sat in that office chair by the window overlooking the river and felt something loosen in my chest that had been wound tight since the day I found that $9,200 withdrawal, something that had probably been tightening for years before that. If I was honest with myself, one small disappointment at a time, one small excuse made on her behalf at a time. My eyes went hot, and I looked out at the gray water and didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. She has no idea this exists, I finally said. No, Diane agreed, which means whatever she's planning it against a version of your finances that doesn't actually reflect reality. Walter, I want to say this plainly. Your daughter made a serious miscalculation. She assumed that because you loved her, you hadn't protected yourself from her. Those aren't the same thing. And it sounds like you understood that a long time before you knew you'd need to. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out exactly what came next. Documentation of the timeline, the withdrawal, the college trust discrepancy David had uncovered, the recorded conversations, all of it organized and dated to establish a clear pattern rather than a single misunderstanding. A formal demand letter for repayment of the $9,200, sent not by me, but by Diane's office, on law firm letterhead, which carries a different weight than a father's tired voice on the phone. And, quietly, in the background, preparation in case the conservatorship threat ever moved from kitchen table conversation into an actual court filing, which would now run headfirst into a trust document Renee never knew existed and could not undo. I drove home that afternoon with the December sun low and orange through my windshield, and I did not feel triumphant. Exactly. I felt something quieter than that, clear-headed, awake in a way I hadn't been in months, maybe years. The demand letter went out the following week. Renee called me 4 days after receiving it, and for the first time since this whole thing began, I heard something in her voice that wasn't confidence. It was closer to fear. "Dad, what is this? A law firm? Are you seriously doing this to me over a boat?" "It was never just about the boat, Renee," I said. "It's about the college trust that never existed. It's about a recorder in my jacket pocket for the last 6 weeks. It's about you sitting at my kitchen table, telling me my own mind wasn't reliable enough to manage a checking account. 3 months after I survived open-heart surgery, while you were quietly building a legal case to take control of everything I own." The silence on the other end of the line went on long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she finally said, and her voice had gone small, in a way I hadn't heard since she was a little girl explaining a broken lamp. I saw what David has, what Marcus's family doesn't have, and I thought, I don't know what I thought. "I know you don't think you were hurting me," I said, and I found, to my own surprise, that this was true, and that it didn't change anything about what needed to happen next. "But you were, and I spent 68 years being the kind of father who caught his children every single time they stumbled, because I thought that was what love looked like. I'm learning something different now. A man who's always there to catch you never lets you learn how to land on your own. I think I did that to you, Renee. I think somewhere along the way I taught you that consequences were something that happened to other people, because I was always standing behind you making sure they never quite reached you. That's on me too. But I'm 68 years old and I just had my chest opened up on an operating table, and I don't have unlimited time left to keep learning that lesson the hard way." She paid back the $9,200 within the month, in 3 installments, the last of which arrived with no note, no explanation, nothing but the transfer itself, landing quietly in my account like a door closing somewhere in a house I could no longer see into. The conservatorship conversation never surfaced again, not because the law firm letterhead alone had settled it, but because whatever calculation Renee had been running, weighing what she could take against what I would allow, had simply stopped adding up in her favor. Once she understood, I had already protected the only things that truly mattered. She still comes by sometimes, though less often now, and when she does, there's a carefulness between us that wasn't there before, a distance measured in exact, polite sentences where there used to be easy silence. I don't know if that gap closes with time, or if it's simply what's left when trust breaks and gets set back down, slightly crooked, no longer quite flush with how it used to sit. I think about that most mornings now, sitting at the same kitchen table where all of this came apart, looking out at Carol's oak tree standing bare against the winter sky, still taller than the house, still outlasting all of us, the way she said she wanted it to. I lost part of my heart's own rhythm on an operating table this year, 6 hours under anesthesia while surgeons rebuilt something inside my chest that had started failing me. But it took a $9,000 boat and a conversation about my own competency at my kitchen table to show me what had actually been failing for years before that, which was my willingness to see my daughter clearly instead of the daughter I had decided, out of love and grief and loneliness, that she was. Maybe that's not entirely a tragedy. Maybe it's just the cost of being the kind of father who keeps giving people chances, long after the evidence has told him to stop. Here is what I know now, sitting in this kitchen on Redbird Lane with the winter light coming through the window over the sink where Carol used to stand doing dishes and humming songs. I never learned the names of protecting your family, real protection, the kind that actually holds up when it's tested, isn't loud, and it isn't built out of trust alone. It's built quietly, on paper, years before you ever think you'll need it, one document at a time, until nobody can talk you out of what's rightfully yours, simply because they've decided you're too old, too sick, or too trusting to notice. If you are the parent in your family who always shows up, who always covers the gap, who has spent a lifetime being the soft place everyone else lands, hear me when I say this. That is not weakness, but it can be used against you if you let it stand in for protection. Check your accounts. Know exactly what you own and how it's held. Talk to someone about a trust before you think you need one, not after. Because the people who love you and the people who are counting on your trust to get away with something do not always announce which one they are, and sometimes they don't even know themselves until the opportunity presents itself. A boat on sale for 2 days, a father freshly out of surgery, an account with a spare key, someone was handed out of love. I chose to protect what was mine, quietly and with evidence, rather than raise my voice or cut my daughter out of my life entirely, and I don't know yet whether that was the wisest path or simply the only one I could live with. What I got back wasn't the daughter I thought I had before all this started. It was something smaller, more honest, and entirely real. A relationship still standing, but rebuilt now on ground I finally understand the shape of. If this story found something true in your own life, tell me in the comments what you would have done differently, and tell me where you're watching from tonight, because I read every single one. If you know someone, a parent, a grandparent, anyone who has ever been the one who catches everybody else, share this with them, because sometimes the kindest thing you can hand another person is the reminder that love and protection are not always the same act. And if you believe, like I've come to believe, that the truth, told plainly and backed up with paper, is the strongest thing an ordinary person can carry into a hard conversation. Stay with me, because there are more stories like this one still to tell. Protecting the people you love sometimes means protecting yourself from them first. It isn't a betrayal to do that. It's simply what the years eventually teach you, whether you're ready for the lesson or not.